Is your life devoid of clear priorities? Maybe you've got the wrong kind of stuff, because enlightenment only comes from a gas stove. And today we'll figure out how that works. Welcome to the Soft Skill channel. My name is Sebastian Jung, and today I've got another topic about work-life balance and personal development for you, which is the four burners theory. Picture a gas stove with four burners, and those four burners are all burning with a blue flame. Now those four burners represent your family, your work, your friends, and your health. And the four burner theory says, if you want to be successful, you have to cut off one of your burners. And if you want to be really successful, you have to cut off two. Now that sounds pretty dark, but we will take a closer look at it. First of all, a quite interesting aspect about the four burners theory is that nobody actually knows where it comes from. The source that is, the only source that is known is an article in the New Yorker by David Sedaris. It's called Love Kookaburra, and it is not about the four burner theory specifically, but he describes a tour through Australia with two friends. And one of those friends, a woman named Pat, at one point in a conversation describes the four burners theory to them. And Pat says she heard about it in a management workshop that she took a few years ago. And nobody knows what this workshop was, or who was the trainer, who was the person who made up the four burners theory, so no one knows where it originally comes from. When I first discovered the four burners theory, my initial reaction was quite negative, because to me it seemed to be the message seemed to be like, oh, if you want to have a decent career, you can't fiddle around with family and friends and stuff. All of that needs to go. And there are plenty of people who understand the four burners theory in this way. You have articles that basically say work-life balance is a myth or an illusion, and the four burner theory proves why that is. And maybe this was the intention of the original creator, because we don't know what his intention was. However, it is not part of the model itself, because the model itself doesn't specify what success is. So maybe for you, success means being the world's greatest dad and husband, or being the world's greatest mother and wife. Or maybe success means to you staying healthy and fit up to an old age. So finally, the four burners theory is about setting priorities in your life. And this is something that comes up frequently in soft skills. Questions like, what do you really want? What do you want from life? What is most important for you? However, usually when they are asked, it's like a child in a candy store. You can grab everything you want, you can have anything, and usually we end up with a lot of things we wish for in addition to the life we currently have, and we are disappointed if that doesn't work out. And the four burners theory is different here, because it clearly shows the potentials and the possibilities, but it also focuses on the price we have to pay. We do not have to cut off any burners. We can evenly distribute our time and effort and attention among all of those four areas of our lives. And this is a totally possible choice and legitimate choice. However, if we do this, we need to be aware that we won't really excel in any of those areas. So we won't be the world's greatest dad or greatest mother, but just a good dad or a good mother. And we won't have a super great career, but we will just have a job that works out fine. So this is what we need to be aware of. And I guess it's a challenge to really maintain this balance over time. On the other hand, we can also decide to really focus on certain areas of our life and to really use our potential and fulfill our potential in those areas and really excel in those areas. However, in this case, we need to be aware that all of the time and effort and energy we pour into this area, that this has to come from somewhere, that this is taken away from the other areas of our lives, and that those areas will in turn suffer. The important thing here is, in my eyes, that we consciously make this decision, that we consciously decide what is important in our lives and what our priorities are and what we might be willing to sacrifice. Because if we don't make the decision consciously, we will make it unconsciously. Now you might wonder, how can you make an important decision unconsciously? Now the important point here is it's not one big decision. There won't be some person showing up who asks you, what is more important to you, your work or your life? Decide right now. But there will be countless small decisions and conflicts in your day-to-day life. Imagine, for example, you are at work and there is a small crisis that you won't be able to solve until the time where you usually finish, and your superiors would like to see you stay longer, and some colleagues already volunteered and they would also like you to stay and help them. But on the other hand, you promised to your kids that you would take them to the zoo, and you know they are looking forward to it and are waiting for it, and you promised, so you have to decide. Or imagine you are just getting ready to go to the gym for the first time in a while, and then a friend calls and says, oh, we haven't seen each other in a while. I have some time now. How about we meet and grab a drink and talk and catch up? And again, you have to decide. And there are countless such decisions. And if you favor one area of your life again and again, for example, if you favor work over family and friends and health again and again and again, this means that this burner will burn brighter and hotter, while other burners dwindle and go down. There is a nice example for that in this book by German author Reinhard Sprenger. The title is literally translated, "The decision is up to you." Die Entscheidung liegt bei dir. We will have a look at this book in a book review soon. And Sprenger is a management consultant, a management coach, and he says when he talks to high-ranking managers, he usually asks them, what is most important for you in your life? And usually the answer is, my kids, my children. And then he asks them, how much time do you spend with your children in a week? And you can imagine how that turns out. So we might wonder, what is the actual situation here? What is the reason for this inconsistency? Are those people who at heart really love their work above everything else, and they maybe just got the kids because, I don't know, they thought it's part of life and you have to do it? Now this would be quite sad for the kids. Or maybe those are people who in their day-to-day life have to or who make decisions again and again against their own priorities because they think there is outside pressure or something, and one day in their deathbed they will probably regret and say, oh no, I wasted my life and I didn't really do what is most important. Now either way, this is a pretty sad situation. So as I said, it is very important to consciously make the decision, because if you make it unconsciously, you might regret it later. But of course, it is quite a difficult decision. And this becomes quite obvious if you have a look at some articles about the four burners theory. You know, personally, if I had to write an article about the four burners theory, what I would probably do is I would say, this is the setup I chose. I turned down this burner in favor of that and whatever. And these are the reasons for my decision. And this is how it has worked out for me so far. But I haven't seen a single article of this kind yet. All of the articles I have read so far discuss strategies to avoid making the decision. For example, you might boost your productivity and your efficiency so you can get more out of a burner that isn't burning very brightly. Or maybe you can combine two burners, for example, by doing sports with your friends. Or maybe you can delegate or outsource. There is one article that makes up a fifth burner that gets all things right. And there is one article where the metaphor is replaced. You don't have a gas staff, but instead you are a juggler who juggles 4 balls, but can only hold 2 at one time, which is supposedly not as scary as that stuff. So, I'm not saying those are bad or stupid ideas. We would have to look at them individually. They probably have their advantages and disadvantages and problems. However, the point is, here they are all quite off topic, because the actual point is to make that important decision. Among those avoidance strategies, I also encountered one that I found quite interesting because it showcases a weakness of the four burners theory, and we will get to that in a minute in the critique. Now, being a model, the four burners theory is obviously a quite simplified depiction of reality, where a lot of things are left off or simplified. But there are a few areas where I find this to be quite noticeable and maybe a bit oversimplified. For starters, the four burners theory has these starting situations where all 4 burners are burning at the same level. However, I don't think this is really realistic. Imagine an employee with a 40-hour work week. And I know in a lot of countries people work way more than that. So 40 hours a week. If we take the time from leaving home in the morning to returning in the evening, so including commute and lunch break and whatever, we probably end up with 50 to 60 hours. Then let's take a look at health. I guess that health also includes sleep. If this person sleeps 8 hours per night, we have 56 hours of sleep per week. So work and health together make up for more than 110 hours. And there are only 168 hours in an entire week. So just work and health have already taken up a majority of the time, and very little is left for family and friends to begin with. Furthermore, there are, of course, individual differences. Imagine person A is married, has a lot of kids. His grandparents and parents and a lot of other relatives all live in the same city, all live close by. Person B is not married, not in any relationship. He doesn't have any kids. His grandparents have died and his parents live in a different city far away. If those people both say, family is most important for me in my life, this would have quite a different impact for person A, who can basically sink unlimited time and energy into his family, as for person B, where the possibilities are quite limited. And another difficult point are those four categories. Family, work, friends, and health. Of course, those are quite important areas, but they don't really cover everything. Maybe you have a hobby that you are really passionate about and that is very important to you, or you do some volunteer work or something like that. Take my situation. I have this YouTube channel going. This takes as much time as a part-time job, but which burner does it belong to? Certainly not health, neither family or friends, and even work doesn't really fit. So the model has some limitations here. And another thing that is not really considered are outside necessities and pressures. Now, for example, there are very few people who have an amount of financial independence that allows them to just stop working from today to tomorrow because they think that family is more important. Most people need to work to sustain their livelihood. In this regard, one of the avoidance strategies I read about is interesting, from an article from James Clear, quite a popular article, often referred to or cited. And in this article, James Clear says, among other things, that we could include the element of time. He talks about seasons of life. So maybe if you are in your early 20s, you will put a big focus on work because you're just starting work and you want to have a good start and build up your career. And a couple of years later, when you are married and you have children, you will tone down work and you will focus on family. And when your kids have left home, maybe you will shift priorities again. And now, of course, this is another avoidance strategy that basically says you can still have everything if you just distribute it throughout your life. But it is also, quite common sense. And I think it applies to a lot of real life biographies, because I think most people will shift priorities throughout their lives and will focus on different things in different times of their life. So this is something that makes sense for me, and it also helps with the problem of outside necessities, because let's take the work burner. If you want to turn the work burner down, if you want to reduce the work burner, you will probably have to increase it and invest in it beforehand. What are the usual ways to reduce the work burner? You could work part-time, for example, a 4-day week or a 6-hour day. However, for that you need a salary that will still sustain your livelihood if 20 to 25% are taken off. Or maybe if you have your own company, you could delegate a lot of administrative work and work less, but you need that company first. So you have to invest in the work burner beforehand so you can turn it down later. A nice example for that is the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early, where people try to live a simple life where they don't spend a lot of money and they invest a large part of their salary so they can retire early at an age of maybe 40 or something like that and live from their savings. So I think taking the element of time into account is helpful and is a nice addition to the model. Now, the model does have some weaknesses and limitations that we should be aware of, but I think it's still quite a nice and helpful model because it really focuses on our priorities, and it doesn't just ask, what do you want to have? Because it is simple to say I want, but it also focuses on the price because it's much harder to say, and I am willing to sacrifice this for it. As I said before, in my eyes, the most important thing is that we consciously make the decision rather than making it unconsciously and regretting it later. If you are not sure which burners to turn up or turn down, I can recommend those priorities. First of all, subscribe to the channel, then like the video, and finally write a comment. This will work out just great. At least I'll be very happy. If you have difficulties really getting started, we will take care of that next week, because there we discuss the topic of procrastination. For today, I'll take my leave. Have a nice day. See you next time.